For the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for June 12th, 2023. I want to say good luck to the Nuggets, and we have a gag order in the council chambers on the ongoing scores. So if you would all stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the Deputy Clerk please call the roll of the members?
Judy Hutchinson,
Here.
Amanda Weir,
I'm here.
Rachel Hulteen,
Present.
Scott Ohms,
Here.
Corey Stites,
Here.
Leah Dozeman,
Here.
Janice Hoppy,
Present.
Valerie Nosler Beck.
She may be absent tonight. I haven't had word from her.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilors, in your packet, you have study session notes of May 15, 2023, and City Council meeting minutes of May 22nd, 2023. Are there any corrections or modifications to be shown to the minutes? Or notes? Seeing none, they stand approved as presented with our thanks to the clerk's office. On the approval of the agenda, I've had a request to pull item number 2 from the agenda tonight. We have a little bit more work to do on that before we bring that to council, if there's no objections. And any other modifications to be noted? Okay, so done. All right. I'll be right back. We have a proclamation in support of Juneteenth on June 19th, 2023. Whereas this nation was founded on the principles stated in the Declaration of Independence that, quote, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but in which people who were black were held in slavery at the time. And whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which states that all persons held as slaves within a state or designated part of a state, quote, shall be then, henceforth forever free, changing the legal status of 3.5 million enslaved peoples who were black from slave to free. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which formally abolished slavery in the United States of America. And whereas news of the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach the most distant slave states until federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, about 3 weeks after the war had ended, to take control of the state and ensure that enslaved people be freed. And whereas the date of respect and remembrance, called Juneteenth, a combination of the words June and 19th, is observed as an important day in our nation's history. And whereas Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Cell Liberation Day, is a federal holiday celebrated on June 19th. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and serves as a reminder of the inequities faced by black people throughout our nation's history. Now, therefore, I, Bud Starker, and the City Council of the City of Wheat Ridge, call upon all citizens in Wheat Ridge to join us in recognizing Juneteenth 2023 and urge all community members to work together to advance the principles of equal rights, justice, and opportunity for all, regardless of race, gender, age, religion, ability, sexual orientation, or gender identity and expression. Dated the 12th day of June, 2023. For a second presentation, or proclamation, I'd like to invite Benny Pies, our Parks and Forestry Open Space Manager, Susan Bennett, our environmental interpreter, and Mary Hester, our sustainability coordinator, to join me at the podium. How's everybody tonight? Great. This is a proclamation in support of Leave No Trace on June 12th, 2023. Whereas Colorado's mountains, forests, deserts, and rivers provide unparalleled recreational opportunities that enrich our lives and are vital to our economy. And whereas litter, pollution, and improper disposal of waste can have negative impacts on our environment and wildlife. And whereas protecting Colorado's natural beauty and preserving the quality of our environment is a responsibility we share. And by working together, we can ensure that our children and grandchildren will continue to enjoy Colorado's great outdoors. And whereas Leave No Trace is an educational, nonprofit organization dedicated to the responsible enjoyment and active stewardship of the outdoors, and Wheat Ridge has been selected as one of only 12 Leave No Trace spotlight locations nationally in 2023. And whereas, by following the 7 Leave No Trace principles, which are plan ahead and prepare, travel and camp on durable surfaces, dispose of waste properly, leave what you find, minimize campfire impact, respect wildlife, and be considerate of others, we can reduce our impact on the environment and help preserve our natural legacy for future generations. Now, therefore, I, Bud Starker, and the City Council of the City of Wheat Ridge, call upon community members to join us in recognizing June 17th, 2023, in the City of Wheat Ridge, and encourage all residents and visitors to follow Leave No Trace principles and take an active role in preserving our natural resources for future generations. Dated this 12th day of June, 2023. And I want to present this. We have a few words you would like to say. Please.
I'd like to thank you, Mayor and City Council, for having us here tonight. We're very excited to be having a Leave No Trace Spotlight. The experience of being in nature is invaluable for the body and soul. During the pandemic, many people discovered this healing opportunity. Visitation to Wheat Ridge Greenbelt has increased, and we have seen additional impacts as a result. Leave No Trace offers ways to educate residents and visitors about how to reduce their impacts while visiting our open spaces. So we are excited that the Wheat Ridge Greenbelt has been nationally recognized by the Leave No Trace organization. Our Leave No Trace Spotlight will be this week, June 15th through 17th, and I want to invite you to any and all of the events that we have. On June 15th at 5:30, we have a social hour and trivia at New Image Brewing. On June 16th at 9 a.m., we will have an informal pickleball event at Prospect Park. And on June 17th at 8:30, we will have a stewardship event at Prospect Park. I think it's fantastic that our city recognizes the importance of implementing this program to preserve our open spaces. And if you want more information about Leave No Trace and the Leave No Trace Spotlight event, I put a flyer on the sign-up table. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, you can get one picture. Come on up. Let's go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now go to our public's right to speak. This is an opportunity to come and speak to the council on any item not on the agenda at our regular meeting for 3 minutes under the right to speak. We will also be taking comment on our special study session items at this times and not when we do the special study session. So if you would like to speak on those 2 items, you may do so now. I don't have anyone signed up to speak. If you're here in the hall and would like to speak, you may do so now. And if you are joining us online and would like to speak to the council, you may do so now by raising your hand. And I'll go to Mary Ann to see if anybody's raising their hand.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Give me just a second. Doesn't look like anybody's coming forward, so we'll conclude our public's right to speak and go to our consent agenda item. Councilor Ohm, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 1, resolution number 32-2023, a resolution approving the Fourth Amendment to an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between Jefferson County and the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, pertaining to community development block grant funding. At issue, based on a relatively small population, Wheat Ridge is not independently eligible for a direct allocation of community development block grant funds from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. Instead, the city has a long-standing partnership with Jefferson County, whereby the county and its smaller jurisdictions collectively are eligible for these federal funds. This partnership is memorialized in an intergovernmental agreement which has been in place since 2011. The purpose of this resolution is to approve a Fourth Amendment to the agreement which modifies language in compliance with federal requirements. Item number 3, resolution number 34-2023, a resolution amending the 2023 fiscal year open space fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $523,551 for the purpose of accepting and appropriating the Metropolitan Football Stadium District reimbursement for youth activity programs. At issue, the City of Wheat Ridge received $523,551 from the sale of the Broncos Football Club. The funds must be used for youth activity programs within the Wheat Ridge community. Staff presented recommendations based on youth feedback at the time, June 5th study session. This resolution will appropriate the stadium district funds for this project. Item number 4, motion to approve the city manager appointment of Derry Elizabeth Hurlbert to the Cultural Commission. At issue on May 7, 2023, Nancy Dragoni, an at-large member of the Cultural Commission, resigned her position effective immediately. The vacancy was posted for a term of 2 weeks on the City of Wheat Ridge website and promoted through various channels from May to May 21st. Applications have been compiled for the city manager review so that the seat can be filled.
Thank you. May I have a motion on our consent agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve items number 1, number 3, and number 4.
Second.
Second by Councilor Hoppe. Will the clerk please poll the council? Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 5. Councilor Hoppe, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Council Bill number 12-2023, an ordinance amending Section 17-36 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to address the use of assisted mobility devices in conservation areas. At issue on July 11th, 2022, City Council amended Section 1752 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to permit the use of assisted mobility devices in conservation areas by persons with disabilities. Subsequently, it was determined additional sections of the code should have been amended as well to address this same issue. This ordinance will amend Section 17-36 to address the use of mobility devices in conservation areas.
This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
Just a real brief presentation from Karen O'Donnell, our Parks and Rec Director.
Okay, Director O'Donnell.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Last year, we were approached by a resident who was interested in utilizing his mobility device, which he happens to use a bicycle, on our conservation trail, and our city code didn't allow that. So Jerry and I discussed options with our team, and utilizing the ADA, we decided to move forward with changing the city code to accommodate that request. And so at that time, in July of last year, we only updated one part of the code that's titled vehicles, but we missed the conservation area section, which essentially says the same thing. So this is really just correcting that to match the change that was made in July of last year.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to questions from council, I will invite the public to speak on this. If you'd like to speak on this, you may come forward now. I have no one signed up to speak. If you're joining us online, raise your hand, and we will bring you into the meeting. And I don't see anybody coming forward. And do we have anybody joining us wanting to speak online? Looks like we do not. So I will close the public input portion of this and go to any questions from council. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and will Ms. Hoppy, may I please have a motion on this?
I move to approve Council Bill Number 12-2023, an ordinance amending Section 17-36 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to address the use of assisted mobility devices in conservation areas on second reading, order it published, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second by Councilor Stites. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much. We'll go to agenda item number 6. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 13-2023, an ordinance repealing and amending certain weapon offenses in Chapter 16 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws in response to the U.S. Supreme Court case law. At issue, this ordinance will repeal Sections 16-84 and 16-87 and amend Section 16-89 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to confirm with the recent Supreme Court ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Braun concerning weapons offenses.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Mr. Dollar, City Attorney.
Okay, Mr. Dahl.
Thank you. I'm going to hand this presentation off to Nick Klein, the attorney in our office who I think you saw at study session that described the Supreme Court case law and has moved forward with drafting this ordinance.
Mr. Klein.
Thank you for having me tonight. So the accompanying staff memo goes through everything in a bit deeper detail. So I'll quickly summarize and open it up for any questions. At issue for repeal in the code are sections 1684 and 1687. As a little background, the Supreme Court in Brune, still wondering which way we pronounce that one. But in that case, they expanded the right to public carry of firearms and introduced a new test for governmental regulation of firearms. Now a government must show that it's within the nation's historical tradition to regulate the conduct, and that any conduct is presumed protected by the Second Amendment unless the governmental body can show that the regulation is within the nation's historical tradition. And this would not just be a showing of 3 cases. This would be perhaps 30 to 50 regulations in the past of the same conduct. And they look more specifically at regulations that were around the founding of the country, the passage of the Second Amendment in 1791, and the passage of the 14th Amendment following the Civil War. In that vein, Section 1684 prohibited the carrying of a multitude of weapons in a person's vehicle. Our office believes that there is no historic tradition outlawing the possession of weapons and vehicles. In fact, we believe the nation's historic tradition would show that people used their vehicle, aka their horses, many times and wielded many weapons upon horseback. So we do not think that this code section would stand up to any scrutiny from a court of law under this new test. In the same vein, Section 1687 prohibited carry where intoxicants are sold, so bars, restaurants. We do not think the city can ban such carrying, concealing, or display of any dangerous weapons such as this, but that does not stop a private business from asking a person to leave if they have a firearm, and then the city could theoretically enforce under a trespass theory. And for Section 1689, we codified the sensitive place doctrine, which the Supreme Court recognized in Brune. The sensitive place doctrine essentially states that governmental regulations in government buildings, polling places, or schools have always been upheld as constitutional under the Second Amendment. So in that light, we expanded Section 1689 to include all government buildings, including city-owned parks and recreation areas. We believe that's a defensible policy position for the city to take. And we did exclude city rights-of-way from this definition, as we believe that the Brune holding stands for the proposition that someone may lawfully open carry on a sidewalk. And we also expanded the code section to make it so that no one may bring a weapon to a polling place as well. And that's my brief introduction of the topic, but I'm happy to field any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council, I'd like to open this up to the public for any questions or comments. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this, but if you're here in the hall and would like to speak, you may do so now. If you're joining us online, please raise your hand and we'll bring you into the meeting. And I don't see anyone either category there, so we will move to any questions from council. Councilor Weaver. Councilor Weaver.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted you to clarify, and I asked this on the first reading as well, that a private business can not only ask a person to leave with a weapon, concealed or otherwise, but they can also post that it's not okay to come into the establishment
Yes,
with concealed or open carry?
yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that for any business, any privately held business in Wheat Ridge. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before I close the public hearing? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Mayor Pro Tem Stites, may I have a motion on this? Thank you very much, Mr. Klein.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill number 13-2023, an ordinance repealing and amending certain weapon offenses in Chapter 16 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws in response to the U.S. Supreme Court case law. On second reading, order it published, and that it shall take effect 15 days after final publication.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Ohm. Is there discussion on the motion? Councilor Weaver.
I would just like to ask a question of the city. Could we provide some guidance for people on what exactly those postings need to say to legally pass as a no trespassing issue, if that's the case?
Sure, I think that we can. Let me give a little thought to that and confer
Okay.
with Nick about what kind of signage would be appropriate. And there's really two things going on here. One, as you point out in your question, the right of a private property owner to regulate their property separate and apart from what the limitations on that right are for the government under the case law decision. And secondly, also, as you point out, how to characterize those notices and then their action on those notices to be able to serve as a platform for a trespass charge. And for
Great.
that reason, I think we'd want to talk to, and we will, the city's prosecutor and the police chief
Thank you.
to be in a position to provide that guidance.
I appreciate that. My second question on that was, does this, if someone's outside on a private property, does that also include them being on the property? I'm thinking of, well, in my case, I'm thinking about my business at my property, but I'm also thinking about outside cafes, what am I trying to say? Outside eating areas, patios, thank you.
All right. Well, in a minute, I'll ask Nick what he thinks, but I'll give him the chance to think about that while I try to answer the question. Typically, sidewalks, even if they're on private property, I'm thinking sidewalks at the Applewood Shopping Center in front of the King Soopers, can or can there not be picketing in that location? Those are traditionally seen as kind of quasi-public spaces because it's anticipated and understood that people will be there for lots of different reasons. So I think I'd draw the line at the sidewalk, probably not, in terms of not being able to restrict. The patio, that's part of the restaurant, and I have no trouble with that. I understand that some sidewalks can be private, but to the extent they're commonly used and seen and relied upon as public spaces, then I wouldn't recommend that the restriction extend, or that a private property owner's restriction would extend it. Well, let me put it this way. I think a private property owner's prohibition in that location would be more difficult to enforce from a trespass standpoint, because you're inviting the general public to be on that sidewalk, rather
If
than
it's the
just your
sidewalk. If
patrons.
it's a gated patio,
Oh,
however, like we
sure.
have for restaurants and
That's-
things, that would be
that's-
them being
that's-
on the.
That's a part of your establishment.
Okay. And,
So no
and, sorry,
problem.
just
Yeah.
one more question,
Uh-huh.
because, so postings would need to be inside and outside, correct?
Well, it needs to be wherever the private property owner, again, we're in private property owner regulation of their property land. So it would be wherever the private property owner feels it best advises their customers. Doesn't have to be outside before you get in. If it's inside and they see that and then they refuse to leave, that's no, in my opinion, there's no defense that, well, gee, it should have been on the door. As long as you're aware of the restriction, you're told you need to leave. Now we're in just trespass on private property world, not really gun regulation world. So it's really just a matter of them being aware of the restriction and not following it
Okay.
to serve as a basis for trespass.
Okay, thank you. Do I need to make an amendment to include anything about signage in this?
No, this is an ordinance, so it wouldn't be appropriate, I think,
Okay.
to add it as in the ordinance, but it's certainly guidance, and unless I'm seeing disagreement from the council, certainly guidance we can prepare and make available to private property owners on request.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council? Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 7. Councilor Dozeman, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill Number 14, 2023, an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning requirements for mixed-use zone districts. At issue, the proposed ordinance makes necessary updates to Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws, specifically to update and clarify development requirements for mixed-use zone districts. The ordinance seeks to modernize portions of the mixed-use code to provide better clarity and organization for easier administration, and to establish standards that were not included in the original regulations.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date, time, and location for a public hearing. May I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve Council Bill Number 14, 2023, an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning requirements for mixed-use zone districts on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, June 26, 2023, at 6:30 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Stites. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We'll go to agenda number 8. Councilor Hulteen, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Council Bill Number 15, 2023, an ordinance amending Articles 5 and 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing and making conforming amendments therewith. At issue, the proposed ordinance reduces minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable dwelling units in multi-unit residential zones and in mixed-use zones, including transit-oriented development areas.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date, time, and location for a public hearing. May I have a motion on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill Number 15, 2023, an ordinance amending Articles 5 and 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing and making conforming amendments therewith. On first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, June 26, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second. Did you second that? Oh, Scott, by Second by Counselor Ohm. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 9. Counselor Hoppy, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 16-2023, an ordinance amending Articles 1 and 2 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning definitions and regulations for child care facilities and making conforming amendments therewith. At issue, the proposed ordinance allows daycare centers in neighborhood commercial and restricted commercial zone districts, updates to the code to align with state regulations, provides cross-references in the zone district use chart for home-based daycare, which are allowed as home occupation, and permits day care centers at institutional properties in residential and agricultural zone districts. The ordinance is intended to reduce barriers to opening new child care facilities in Wheat Ridge.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date, time, and location for a public hearing. May I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve Council Bill number 16-2023, an ordinance amending Articles 1 and 2 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning definitions and regulations for child care facilities and making conforming amendments therewith. On first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, June 26, 2023 at 6:30 as a virtual meeting and in council chambers, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second by Counselor Dozeman. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We'll now go to agenda item number 10. Counselor Weaver, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a motion to approve an appointment to the Parks and Recreation Committee. At issue on May 8th, 2023, Patrick Quinn from District 3 resigned from the Parks and Recreation Committee effective immediately to accept a position in the District 3 Planning Commission, the vacancy in the District 3 Planning Commission. The vacancy was posted for a term of 2 weeks on the City of Wheat Ridge website and promoted through various channels from May 8 through May 21. Applications have been compiled for council's review so that the seat can be filled. While there are no applications from District 3, council may appoint a member from a different district to fill this seat.
Thank you. This is a motion of the council. May I have a motion, please?
Yes, I move to appoint Mark Duty of District 3 to the Parks and Recreation Committee, term to expire March 2nd, 2026.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Counselor Stites. Is there a discussion on the motion? Counselor Dozeman.
Thank you. So was that an additional applicant? I'm not seeing that in our packet.
He did apply a few weeks earlier for a different position, and was, because Patrick Quinn went on to the planning commission, we talked to Mark Duty about wanting to be on the Parks and Recreation. And Mr. Stites and I felt it was important to have a District 3 representative.
Okay. And is that according to the process of, like, I definitely think that a District 3 applicant should be appointed to this position. If that's the case, I just didn't know if that's like following protocol or how that works.
My understanding is that we have said several times that we keep applications on file. That's what's been said publicly.
Yeah, they are kept on file. I'm not sure why this one was not included in the packet. I don't know if Allie has any.
Yeah, typically we only include applications for a specific seat that folks applied for. But I'm looking at Mr. Dahl. I see no reason. This does follow the process where they were kept on file for a year. Councilor Weaver, we don't necessarily reach out to everyone that has applied for a district when a new seat comes up. We always reach out to the people that applied for that particular commission and make sure they're still interested before we present them to you. But again, if Mr. Duty applied within the last year, and we have his application on file, and you've spoken to him, and he's happy to serve on the
We
Parks
did
and
verify
Rec
that.
I
Commission.
spoke to him. He's happy to serve.
Sure. I mean, Mr. Dahl, I see no reason why he couldn't be appointed.
He's under the code, he's eligible.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Any further questions?
And his application came in for the the recent planning commission. So we should have it within the last 2 months.
Great. We'll just pull that and make sure it's all buttoned up, and really appreciate you bringing that up.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council? Yes, second
Oh,
by
Stites.
Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. With that, we will go to agenda item number 11. Councilor Hulteen, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Resolution Number 35, 2023, a resolution establishing the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund, transferring $436,680 from general fund reserves and authorizing payment to Foothills Regional Housing in the amount of $400,000 for the purpose of an affordable housing project. At issue, City Council directed staff to establish the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund, a recommendation of the recently adopted Housing Strategy and Action Plan, using the general fund portion of short-term rental lodgers tax revenue. Foothills Regional Housing recently approached the city about a rare opportunity to purchase a 24-unit apartment complex at 4097 Vance Street to serve residents in the 50 to 80% area median income AMI category. This is a unique opportunity to take an early implementation step in the affordable housing strategy by creating new affordable units in Wheat Ridge. This resolution creates the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund, transfers the applicable portion of the STR lodgers tax revenue from the general fund reserves to the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund, and authorizes a $400,000 payment to Foothills Regional Housing to assist in the purchase of the 24-unit affordable housing complex.
Thank you. This will be a resolution of the council. Mr. Goff, do we have any further staff presentation on this?
The issue statement was pretty detailed, but Ms. Scheck may want to add just a few items to this.
I think I just wanted to share how excited I am. So this is the result of, this sort of closes one chapter of this book. We were here talking, I think, in 2 separate study sessions about the short-term rental, dedicating the general fund portion of that. And of course, you all gave us consensus to move forward with establishing the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund the same night that you adopted the Affordable Housing Strategy and Action Plan. And I know the consultant was so excited. He's like, well, that's fast. Good job, Wheat Ridge. And we were intending to bring that fund to you as part of the budget process. But I'll turn it back to Mr. Goff because I think this was just such an incredibly exciting opportunity that he spoke with you all about to support an affordable housing acquisition right here in our city, that we're here tonight to accomplish that. So thank you for the very clear direction in prior meetings. And we're excited to establish this fund for you. And hopefully, the short-term rental portion will continue to be around that $400,000 a year to generate that steady stream of revenue to be used for it. But I don't know, Mr. Goff, if you'd like to talk about the apartment building.
Actually, a representative, Amy Case from Foothills Regional Housing, she didn't think this was going to be up to about 7:30, so you guys are moving very quickly. Thank you. But she's logging on right now. She did want to speak. She's not quite on. I think the mayor had heard from them also, and they're very happy and very thrilled. I believe they mentioned that this was the first time a city has actually given cash for a purchase of a building. So they are very thrilled with this, and we thank you. As Ali said, this is a very rare opportunity to provide immediately some affordable housing in the city. They will give preference for half of their units in this building for our housing navigation program. So we'll have some units available for that program. Let's see if she's happens to be on. Nope, she might be having trouble logging on. So, but that's all we have on this. Unless you have any questions, maybe she'll just jump on here in a second.
Okay, before we go to questions from council, we will open this up for the public to speak on. If you're a member of the public and would like to speak on this, now is your opportunity. I don't have anybody signed up to speak on the sign-up sheet, but if you're here in City Council chambers and would like to speak, you may do so by coming to the podium. If you're joining us online, you may raise your hand and we will bring you into the meeting. And I'll give it just a moment to see if we have anybody online. We don't have anybody online. We don't have anybody stepping forward. And I don't know if I can stall too much longer. So anyway, I will go to questions from council. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question does not reflect my enthusiasm for this, but I'm just curious, for things like this, what's the relationship between making decisions like this and the Wheat Ridge Housing Authority?
The housing authority at the Wheat Ridge Housing Authority at this, is that, you asked, I'm sorry, the Wheat Ridge Housing Authority. We haven't, they're pretty much been in I'm trying to think of the right word. We put them on pause for a while. The Fruitdale project was kind of their last major project, which depleted their funding. So we are planning to bring back a discussion. So there was no a discussion with them on this project, but we plan to bring back a discussion with City Council on how to reestablish the Housing Authority so that they can be involved in this new housing fund and providing recommendations and maybe even implementation of the housing fund with depending on what programs come up out of that program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from council? Seeing none, may I have a motion on this item?
Yeehaw. I move to approve resolution number 35, 2023, a resolution establishing the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund, transferring $436,680 from general fund reserves and authorizing repayment to Foothills Regional Housing in the amount of $400,000 for the purpose of an affordable housing project.
Second.
Who didn't second that?
Who didn't? Okay, well, Councilor Hoppy got the second on this one. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just, reading that recommended motion just brought so much joy to my civic heart. It was really exciting to, identify using our short-term rental tax revenue for this purpose. And I just want to, recognize my peers on the dais and city staff for their work in our affordable housing strategy and just how quickly we are actually taking ideas and turning them into action in this community. And this is like just real and meaningful impact. And I couldn't be prouder that it's a District 2 project. But this is going to make a difference in 24 people's lives who are going to be able to call Wheat Ridge home. And this couldn't happen without the good policy work that we're doing. And I just really want to thank everyone. And I'm just so grateful that we were in a position to say yes when this opportunity came up, because you don't know when it's going to happen again. So just good work to everybody. And I couldn't be more excited about this. And I'm already excited to figure out next year what we're going to do with our next $400,000. So just thank you, everyone. And I'm just really proud of this work.
Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for those kind words, Councilwoman Hulteen. I would just like to say thank you to you. This was your brainchild. I remember sitting at breakfast having this initial discussion with you. And you're the one that really kind of brought forward we should be using our short-term rental taxes to bring affordability into our community. And so thank you very much for that.
Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. This is good news indeed, and want to thank Councilmember Hulteen for a great idea and lightning speed of the staff. It was a very fast question and answer from everybody, and appreciate your effort. Always very proactive. This really, I think the community should be aware that we really do try to set the bar pretty high and try to move forward and trying to solve problems. Thank you.
I wanted to pass on to the council that Mr. Goff spoke earlier, that I had occasion to speak with Lori Rosendahl at Foothills Regional Housing about 2 weeks ago, and she was just couldn't have been more complimentary to the city and our staff, and most importantly to our city council for really making this happen. So I think this is really a good way to kick off a great affordable housing effort here on permanent affordable housing in our city. So thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. We will go to agenda item number 12. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Motion approving a legal services agreement between the city and Murray Dahl Barry Renaud
Yep.
LLP. At issue, the city's home rule charter at section 8.1 provides for appointment of the city attorney by the city council. The current legal service agreement is updated and should be renewed.
Thank you. This will be a motion of the council. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
I don't know, Mr. Dahl?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do a staff presentation. Thanks, Council. As noted in the issue, there's really actually a couple of reasons to get this done. First, what we have presently, we think, is kind of an old and unsigned version of a legal services agreement. I was appointed city attorney in 1995, and we've had various agreements since that time, but we looked, and we're not completely certain we have a good, solid signed agreement, and we really should have that, so that it checks that box. And secondly, it does adjust our rates for our work. And I should tell you that our rates, my rates for the city have always, and my firm's rates have always lagged behind what is kind of the market out there. And I will tell you, I'm completely fine with that. The city has been my best client for the 28 years that I've done this work, and I love doing it. And the city's a terrific client to work for. And so it's absolutely worth it, especially in public law. The rates for private work are about double what you see here, at least. And in part, I think that's because private clients don't always pay you, you know, and you argue about the bill, and cities, and especially the city, has always really been a good client in terms of that, and that has real value to a small business. I will tell you that even the rates as adjusted are either at or below what the other attorneys at our firm are charging for their other city clients. And my partners have for years complained to me about the level of my rates, and I for years have pushed back to say these are solid clients that are here every month and every year, and that has enormous value to our firm. And they have accepted that argument from me fairly graciously, but you know, I have to at some point pay a little attention to them. And so that's the proposal, is to raise that set of rates, and I wouldn't expect to be raising again for a number of years.
Okay.
Because I think I can put my partners off for quite a few more years yet.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council, we'll open this up to the public to speak on agenda item number 12. I don't have anyone signed up, but if you're here in the hall, you may come to the podium and speak now. And if you're joining us online, please raise your hand. We're happy to bring you into the meeting. And I don't see anybody coming forward, either online or in person, so I'll open it up to questions from council. Looking left, looking right, don't see anybody. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, may I have a motion on this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the contract for legal services between the city and Murray Dahl Berry Renaud LLP.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Ohm. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk, oh, wait a minute, Councilor Hoppe.
I just wanted to quickly say I'm certainly happy to retain Mr. Dahl as our city attorney, and I appreciate just also the historic knowledge, but I just appreciate the way in which you do your job. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And I will just chime in to say that Mr. Dahl and I have worked almost since he came to employment with our city, and it's been a good relationship, and he's very good to keep his presentations just as brief as he needs to be. So thank you. If there's no more questions, would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much. We will now go to agenda item number 13. Councilor Hutchinson, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 36-2023, a resolution amending the fiscal year 2023 general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $62,089 for the addition of one full-time IT project manager. At issue, the city is in the contracting phase for new enterprise resource planning systems, ERP, with the anticipated project start date of October 2023. Through months of research and discussions with the city's consultant and other jurisdictions, it has become clear that the city is not staffed appropriately to undertake this scale of project, and that the addition of a full-time project manager is necessary to ensure success.
Thank you. This will be a resolution of the council. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
We do. Deputy City Manager Scheck will give a brief presentation.
All right, Deputy City Manager Scheck.
It's a mouthful.
Please go
Thank
ahead.
you.
It is quite a mouthful.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Thank
We'll
you,
get the
Mayor.
marbles out and we'll try it again.
Yes, and thank you, Councilor Hutchinson, for reading that issue statement so clearly. As you know, we've been working on this for about 18 months now, and we plan to be back with you this summer, hopefully in the next month or so, for contract approval. Actually, we're in the final negotiations now with the main system for finance, sort of everything to do with finance, building permitting and licensing, and courts. And what's really great is that the finance system and the building permitting and licensing system is one system. And courts, it's the same vendor. We're looking at a separate system for HRIS personnel, payroll, time and attendance, and one other for revenue, because our Colorado, our very complicated home rule municipality, Colorado tax code is so complicated that sort of national systems don't do a great job, and there's 3 in particular that do a really good job. So all that to say, we're close to coming back to you for that contract approval. And as Councilor Hutchinson said, we've done a lot of research, we've talked to a lot of other cities, other consultants, and it's become very clear that we need on-site help, on-staff help to really implement this project. This project will take 2 to 3 years to fully implement, beginning to end. And our goal is to hire a rock star who will be here to not only help us improve and change our processes and streamline those processes that you've asked us to do, but also really train our staff and help them through this. This is going to be a huge lift for us, transformational for this organization. And our goal is that we make things better for the community, better for the business community, better for our employees, and we keep people through this time. And so we really appreciate your support tonight to get this position on board as soon as possible so that we can kick this off this fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council, I'll open this up to the public. I don't have anyone signed up to speak, but once again, if you're here in City Council Hall, you may come forward and speak at the podium, and if you're joining us online, raise your hand, and I don't see anyone coming forward. So we'll open this up to questions from council. Any questions before we go to a vote? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll, let me have a motion on this. Councilor Hutchinson, I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
I move to approve resolution number 36-2023, a resolution amending the fiscal year 2023 general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $62,089 for the addition of 1 full-time IT project manager.
Second.
Motion and a second, and Mayor Pro Tem Stites, was that you again seconding that motion? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes our regular agenda items. I think we will now move to staff, city managers matters.
Councilmember Hoppy's given me the evil eye, so out of the respect for the Nuggets, I will pass this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go to city attorney's matters.
Gosh, I guess I better pass.
Okay,
other than
everybody's
thanking the
everybody got
council for your-
got the memo. Now
Yeah, I
we'll
got the memo. I'm going to pass. Thank
we
you.
will go to elected officials matters and to start with Councilor Dozeman.
Nothing at this moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hutchinson,
Nothing tonight.
thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Got the opportunity to stop at the Get Right's Bakery, and which is new, and I was extremely surprised and happy about the purchase. I noticed because there's a long line, and I thought anytime there's a long line, it has to be really good, and it was worth the wait. So, for those who haven't tried it, it's right next to Stylus and Crate. I'd recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you. We shared a real nice cream pie with blueberries on it this morning at the Stylus that had come from this location. It's definitely going to be hard for your waistband. Councilor Holteen.
Thanks. I'll be quick out of respect for the Nuggets. So just to Councilor Ohm's point, District 2 has 2 businesses that have like lines waiting for them. King of Wings frequently has, almost every day they're open, there's a line that can oftentimes go like halfway down the block. It's crazy. And Get Rights is also worth waiting in the line. So get in line. District 2's got good stuff. I just want to continue sharing my enjoyable trip through Happiness Gardens that I take with my dog several times a week. It is just every week becoming just more phenomenal. There's just, of course, things in bloom, but the city's investments in demonstration gardens and the food forest and everything, it's just, if you have not walked through there, I encourage you to. And one of the things that's happening one Wednesday morning a month is Regenerate Wheat Ridge program. And this Wednesday is the workshop on Peek into a Bee's Life. And I do recall the first time we offered that, Mayor Starker boldly put on some bee suited up to go hang out with the bees at Happiness Gardens. So please engage in all the good things happening at Happiness Gardens.
I was a little disappointed I couldn't buzz after I had put on the suit, but we're still working on that. Thank you very much. Councilor Weaver. Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
If you can find your Nuggets stuff in Wheat Ridge, find it and buy it in Wheat Ridge.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just say thank you to the folks that joined me on Saturday morning last for coffee with the mayor at Vinola's, and thank you to Vinola's for hosting us. We had a great discussion. I don't have anything else. Is there any other business to come before council before we adjourn? We will not be here next week because of Juneteenth. We will be here the following week at a regular meeting, I think, right, Mr.
June
Miller?
26th, yes.
Okey-doke. So if there's no more business, we will stand adjourned. And I will ask, do we need to take a break or do we want to go right into, everybody okay to move forward with our study session? Then we will go directly into our study session. The curtain's coming down. Okay, well. We'll give it just a minute or two.
Fritos?
Sorry. Yep, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our Assistant City Manager, Mary Ann Schilling, will introduce this item.
Good evening, thanks. As you know, our resident survey is the city's consumer report card, and the purpose of the survey is to do a few things. One is to assess resident satisfaction with community characteristics and amenities. Another is to evaluate Wheat Ridge local government and our city employees. And finally, to further understand the residents' priorities regarding government services in Wheat Ridge. So we reference this document consistently throughout the years, and then we also consider it when we're building our budget each year. We really appreciate all the feedback that we get from our residents, and we really use it as a tool to inform which direction we should go with our city resources. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jade Arocha. She is going to review the 2023 survey results in detail. Jade is the Director of Survey Research for POCO National Research Center, and then afterwards we'll all be available for any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Marianne. Everybody hear me okay? Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. As Marianne said, my name is Jade Arocha. I am the Director of Survey Research for Polko National Research Center, and I'm pleased to be here to present the results of the 2023 resident survey to you all. And before I get started, I would like to thank Marianne for being a wonderful resource as our primary point of contact throughout this project, as well as my colleague Kim Daney, who was the project manager, who did actually all the work on your survey project this year. There we go. So just a little bit about who we are before I dive in. National Research Center has worked with Wheat Ridge for a number of years, conducting resident surveys. NRC, as we are known, is based in Boulder, Colorado. We've been around for almost 30 years, and we conduct all types of surveys, primarily resident, business, and employee surveys across the country. In 2019, we merged with Polko, which is a resident online engagement platform. And we now are able to provide both the civic engagement tool through Polko as well as the traditional surveys that National Research Center has provided. And because of our extensive experience in this industry, we have an extensive benchmarking database comprised of over 500 communities across the nation. So as I speak about Wheat Ridge's results tonight, and as I go through the results, I'll be referring to benchmark comparisons for Wheat Ridge, both nationally, so to the entire database, and also to a subset of communities from that database, which is peer communities here in the Front Range. And the survey methodology, just want to speak about that as well. So this was the 8th iteration of the resident survey. First iteration was all the way back in 2004, and these are conducted every 2 to 4 years, roughly. This year's survey was conducted from March 7th to April 18th of this year, and we employed what we call a multi-contact approach, where the selected households received a postcard in the mail, followed by 2 survey packets, each of those 1 week apart. I'll get into a little bit more detail momentarily. So we call this a probability sample, because we randomly selected 4,500 households that were located within the boundaries of Wheat Ridge to receive these mailings. And that random sample is an important part of representative survey methodology. It ensures that you are hearing from a representative sample of your residents and not just those that may choose to go online and say, participate in an online community survey. So with that multi-contact approach, we did actually provide a paper survey, 2 different copies of that paper survey to each of those 4,500 households. And all of the mailed materials also contained a web link, so residents could go online if they preferred to complete the survey. The mailed materials were also available in English and Spanish, so the cover letters that accompanied the surveys as well as the postcards were dual language. And the survey was available online in Spanish. Only English paper copies were delivered to households, but the survey was available online in English and in Spanish. I do want to point out that we did not receive any Spanish responses this year to the survey, but it was available. And with those 4,500 households, we received a total of 844 responses for an overall response rate of 19%, which is right about what we would expect to see for a survey such as this one, using methods like this. With those 844 responses, that provides a margin of error of plus or minus 3% around any of the results that you see in the report. And then finally, we statistically weight the data using census data so that it is more representative and it more closely aligns who we heard from with who actually lives in Wheat Ridge. It's an important part of gold standard survey methodology. Getting into the overview of survey results here. So I mentioned our benchmark comparisons. I'll first talk about the national comparisons. So we had 79 items on Wheat Ridge's survey for which we could provide comparisons to our national database. And so higher or lower indicates a difference of more than 10 points
from the average rating. So of those 79 items, 39 survey questions were rated similarly to the national average, 4 were higher, and 36 were lower. In case you're wondering what those 4 were that were higher, those were ease of bus travel, the rate of attendance of Wheat Ridge festivals or special events, recreation facilities, and the proportion of residents who would recommend living here to someone who asked. And then compared to Front Range peers, out of 69 available items for which we could provide comparisons, 46 were similar, 9 were higher, and 14 were lower. And I'll cover again, I'll refer back to these benchmarks throughout the presentation, but the 9 that were higher tended to be around housing, both variety and affordability of housing, and then affordability of other aspects of the community as well, as well as the overall image of the city, and those who would recommend living here and plan to remain here for the next 5 years. All of those were higher than the Front Range averages. And then finally, compared to 2021, which is the most recent survey iteration, out of 226 items on the survey for which we could provide trends, 150 were similar year over year, 26 were higher, and 50 were lower. Because you had such a large response to the survey, the margin of error, we call a by-year margin of error, that's 5 percentage points of difference, indicates a statistically significant change from year over year. So just to repeat that, if you're looking just at the 2023 results, your margin of error is 3% around any given percent. But if you're looking at comparisons over time, you're looking at a 5% margin of error in the differences there. Okay, going into our key findings. So these key findings are found in toward the front of the report, and these were what stood out to us as survey researchers. With that said, this is a very dense survey with a lot of information, so these are just really the highlights that we found as we reviewed the data. It is by no means a comprehensive overview of every single data point in that report, so just putting that out there. So key finding number 1, residents enjoy a positive quality of life in Wheat Ridge, and most plan to remain living in the city. So about 8 in 10 residents continue to feel positively about the overall quality of life in Wheat Ridge, and this rating was similar to peer communities in the nation and in the Front Range. And further, at least 7 in 10 residents positively rated Wheat Ridge as a place to live, their neighborhood as a place to live, and the city as a place to raise children. About 6 in 10 positively rated Wheat Ridge as a place to retire and as a place to work. And then about half gave excellent or good ratings to the physical attractiveness of Wheat Ridge as a whole. So where comparisons were available, these ratings were similar to the benchmark comparisons, both sets of comparisons. Some other general questions regarding quality of life in Wheat Ridge. So there was a multiple response question on the survey asking residents what their reasons were for living here in Wheat Ridge. And 3/4 indicated that they just like the location in general. More than half said they like their neighborhood. About 45% they said they feel safe here. And then roughly 3 in 10 chose small town feel, having friends or family in the area, affordability of housing and rental rates, and also access to dining and entertainment. And then finally, I mentioned this before, but ratings were higher than the national and Front Range averages for the proportion of residents that would recommend living in Wheat Ridge to someone who asked, and also surpassed the peer benchmark, the Front Range benchmark comparisons for the proportion that plan to remain here for the next 5 years. 9 in 10 residents said that they would do both of those, were very or somewhat likely to do both of those things. Key finding number 2, characteristics of community livability in Wheat Ridge are highly rated by residents and on par with or higher than Front Range peers. So digging a little deeper here into some more specific community characteristics ratings, and I've provided that we have more than 2 years of trend data for these items, but for ease of visibility on this slide, I've just provided the last 2 years.
So we can see a few things happening here. Overall, we can see the green stars to the left indicate that those items were rated more positively, higher than average than the front range averages for overall image reputation and availability of affordable quality food. Sorry, 2 stars there that are shown on this slide. We can also see some declines year over year for many of these items, including availability of parks, availability of paths and walking trails, and also availability of bike paths and bike lanes. So I want to say that for basically any of these ratings, we tend to tell our clients that a survey can tell you what people think, but not why they think it. So there's definitely more opportunity to look into why these ratings may have changed. But as we dug into more of the finer points of detail in the reports, there's cross tabulations, for example, by area of residence and by different demographic characteristics. We found that younger people tended to give lower ratings to these aspects than younger, meaning younger than age 35, than those who were older than age 35. We also considered whether the rate of use of some of these amenities may have changed due to the pandemic, which is a possibility. And then finally, if there are closures, not necessarily just in Wheat Ridge, but in the area. The survey does ask residents to think about Wheat Ridge, but often we find that if there are trail systems, for example, that go slightly outside your boundaries, they might not be thinking about that as they're answering this question. It is a perception survey, so it's important to keep in mind when you are reviewing these ratings. And then, while I'm on the topic of declining ratings over time, we have, in general, for almost all of our clients that have every 2-year survey cadence. So they say they surveyed last in 2020 or 2021, and now they're surveying again. We have found for virtually all of our clients, not just in the Front Range, but nationwide, ratings have dropped in most categories. So you're gonna notice this theme as I continue through the presentation, and I just wanted to call attention to that and say that we have seen this almost universally across most of our clients in all areas, particularly government performance. And again, surveys tell us what but not why, but our suspicion is that if we look at longer term trend lines for, again, most of our clients, we can see a little bit of a spike in 2020 and 2021 across most areas. And our thinking around that is that residents felt more positively about particularly their local governments during the height of the pandemic, and because the efforts of their local governments were a lot more visible, were a lot more top of mind in news cycles and on social media and such. So now we're seeing things kind of take a return back to baseline in many of our communities. So, okay. I won't take that long on each slide, I promise. Key finding number 3, transportation in Wheat Ridge is a potential area of improvement. So again, aspects of transportation, we see a decline here, particularly in the area of transportation related to the theme of declining trends over time, particularly from height of the pandemic to now. Transportation tends to be a particularly noticeable decrease. And I mean, for perhaps obvious reasons, there were fewer cars on the road, ratings for traffic flow in most of the communities where we survey, and car-related travel went up sometimes quite a bit in 2020 and 2021. Again, now seeing a return back to baseline for a lot of those items. Most of these ratings tended to be similar to the national and Front Range benchmarks, and a few were lower, including condition of city streets, ease of walking, and traffic flow on major streets. Those were lower than Front Range communities, and then ease of bus travel was higher than the national benchmark. There was a set of new questions on this year's survey regarding a potential extension of the 1/2 of 1 cent sales tax. This question asked residents about 4 different potential uses for this tax and how likely they would be to support it. 8 in 10 residents were very or somewhat likely to support sidewalk and street improvements on primary corridors such as 38th Avenue, 44th Avenue, and Youngfield Street. And also, separately, 8 in 10 were likely to support filling sidewalk gaps throughout the city with an emphasis on major pedestrian corridors. The other two items on this question that are not shown here were support for drainage and floodplain and infrastructure improvements throughout the city. 3 quarters supported that. And then the expansion of the Wheat Ridge Rec Center, 60% supported that. So just a little bit of, for comparison's sake. So these two were at the top of the list in terms of levels of support. Key finding number 4, ratings for many city services are declining. Overall quality of city services, so this is just city services as a whole, has stayed, as you can see, very consistent and stable over time. About 7 in 10 residents giving this excellent or good ratings. And then looking at our top rated city services, so there's a total of 27 city services asked about on the survey. And we can see here, I've kind of aggregated these by the proportion of residents who positively rated each. Rising to the top, recreation facilities was higher than the national benchmark. And then we can see declining ratings for the other items on this slide. So of those 27 individual services, this is there's a lot of information in the report itself about this particular set of questions. We asked about the quality and the importance of each of these services. And then we also looked at trends over time. So of the 27, 19 items declined between 2021 and 2023. These included recreation facilities, even though it declined, it's still above the national average, but also maintenance of existing city parks, of open space and trails, recreation programs, and then a few policing-related items, animal control, and a few others. This is a quality and importance matrix. So this is displayed a couple of different ways in the report, including in a chart, but the font in the chart was not going to be visible to you all if I put it on a slide this evening. So what you're seeing here are, we have divided the quality and importance ratings for each of these items by the median importance and median quality rating for each. And what we particularly want to call attention to is the upper left corner, which is shaded there. Those are services that residents gave relatively high ratings of importance and relatively low ratings of quality to. And then finally, the red and bolded font items are those that are lower than the national benchmark comparisons. So there's a lot of information shown here. We're trying to show it to you in a little bit more of an actionable way. That top left quadrant is going to be areas to most focus on for the city. Key finding number 5, residents continue to feel safe in most areas of Wheat Ridge and support prioritizing safety efforts throughout the city. So similarly to previous years, residents felt safest in their homes, in recreation centers, and in their neighborhoods, as well as in parks and playgrounds. Those ratings remained stable over time. About 7 in 10 felt safe in retail and commercial areas, which was a decline since 2021. And then on the trail system and on roadways, those ratings declined as well as far as safety. And for those two items in particular, that may be tied more to physical safety around car traffic, more so than other types of safety concerns, for example, property crime or some such. So just different nuances to keep in mind as you review these ratings. We also asked about the importance of police department resource prioritization. And the question asked residents to rate how important they felt each of these items was to focus on in the next 12 months. And this is showing the percent that said essential or very important. Those are combined here. So solving violent crimes, 94% rated important. Solving property crimes, 88%. And about 3/4 reducing illegal drug activity, reducing illegal activities committed by youth, and crime prevention.
And then 6 and 10, enforcement of traffic laws, and then code enforcement with 54%. All of these ratings remain stable from 2021 to 2023. Looking at police department priorities by year, these ratings have remained relatively stable over time as well. Most respondents placed a medium or high priority on directing additional city resources toward crime-related mental health issues in the community. This was emerged as the top priority in this question, followed by adding surveillance cameras in high-crime areas, more relationship-based policing officers, and then better connection with the community, such as at community forums and events. Also, increased visibility of police, greater accessibility to police and police-related information, and finally, adding officers in public schools. It's important to note that at least 7 in 10 residents rated each of these as at least a medium priority. And then 2 items did increase significantly from 2021 to 2023. Those were adding surveillance cameras in high-crime areas and adding officers in public schools. Our 6th and final key finding, economic development, is important to Wheat Ridge residents. When asked to rate the following statements by circling the number which represents their opinion, so this indicates the level of agreement with each of these statements. Percent strongly or somewhat agree. So 88% agreed that strengthening Wheat Ridge's community image and identity represents their opinion. About 3/4 agreed to promote efforts to revitalize Wheat Ridge's housing areas, promote efforts to attract new jobs, and to attract and recruit new types of retail businesses to Wheat Ridge. So strong support from at least 3/4 of residents for all of those items. 6 and 10 supported promoting efforts to revitalize Wheat Ridge's business areas, and then half prioritized promoting efforts to revitalize business corridors such as 38th Avenue, 44th Avenue, Wadsworth, and Kipling. That is a summary of our key findings. And these are questions that we like to put forward, particularly when we are facilitating workshops, just as questions to consider as you review the report, what to think about as you review the results in more depth. And then finally, Wheat Ridge. So I mentioned earlier that that residents had the opportunity to complete the survey online, and those that did complete the survey online were directed to Polco, our online platform, to do so. When they were there, they were asked if they would like to sign up for to be on Wheat Ridge's panel of residents. It will be notified if any further content is posted by the city on that platform. And so there's currently about 800 subscribers to Wheat Ridge's profile. And so those are residents that would be notified if you were to post any additional content, any follow-up. Usually short form surveys are what people like to follow up with, particularly on items that might have raised some questions in the main survey effort to dig deeper on, also allow you to collect open-ended responses from residents as well. What questions can I answer?
Thank you, Jade, for a great presentation. We'll open up for questions. Councilor Ulm.
Yeah, I have 2. One is, what did you mean by snow removal? Was that specific to street snow removal or sidewalk snow removal?
We don't differentiate between the two, although the question is in a set of others that talk about streets. So it's likely that the perception of that question would be street snow removal.
Okay. And then was there anything in regards to how do people feel riding the bus as far as safety?
I don't believe that was in the list of items. We could add that for the next survey iteration.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is maybe a little bit more of an observation than a question. But when I first went through this, first of all, I felt like there was kind of a lot of like contradictory stuff, which is not entirely unusual, I'm sure, but,
I didn't quite hear what you said. There was a lot of what?
oh, sort of contradictory things,
Mm.
which, you know, we all like put our, you know, try to reconcile. And first of all, it's good to know that people generally feel good about living here. And I think the things that people were giving us sort of like the critical feedback on are, I think, things that we are currently working on and continue to try and do better with. So I think it's helpful. But one of the thoughts that came to mind was if maybe in the 2 years since this survey was last offered, we continue to have a lot of newer, younger families moving in, and they're coming from other parts of town. And I was wondering if some of like the perceptions that come through here and expectations are really being imported from other communities. So maybe it's not like a reflection on how we've changed as a city, but rather how our demographics have changed a little bit. And then when you said that the younger participants were a little bit more critical, that kind of jived with sort of my spidey sense on reading some of this. And I think my other observation was just, you know, some of the feedback on the transportation. I mean, having a project like Wadsworth happening in our community is going to have just a gigantic negative perception on people, because it's not just impacting travel on Wadsworth, it's 44th and 38th, and creating a lot of sort of like chaos. So I just want to call attention to you know, the impact of that one project can really like spill over quite a bit. Not that Kipling doesn't have its own issues, but anyway, so just a couple of reflections, no questions per se. Thanks.
Those are great observations, and the same thing occurred to us. I mean, I'm local to, I live and work in Boulder, so very aware of the dynamics of our area in general. Yes, the change in the demographic mix of the community is absolutely going to have an impact on ratings. That's the aged crosstabs. There's also many other demographic characteristics that we provided crosstabs for. Definitely worthwhile to look at, and they do point out whether or not a difference in opinion is statistically significant or not, so you don't have to guess. It's denoted right there in the tables. But yes, great points in terms of that could be a factor. Going back to the example of paths and walking trails, it could also be the survey was conducted from March to April. There's seasonal trail closures in the general area. Could that have had an impact on resident perception? It's just, again, we can tell what, we can't tell why. So those are just really good questions to consider as you review the results.
Thank you. Additional questions? I had one. You offered it online and on paper. How did that work out?
It went well.
Okay, good.
In terms of the split of responses, so I will say generally over time, we have seen an enormous increase in the proportion of respondents who choose to take a survey online. It used to be not even that long ago, about 7, 8 years ago, we would see only up to about 5% of respondents would choose to take a survey online. Now it's more like half. I don't think I have it in my notes, actually, what the split was this year. I can follow up with you. But that's typically what we're seeing these days is about half choose to take the survey online. Wheat Ridge is a little bit unique in that most of our clients have shifted from the 3-part mailing, the postcard survey, to a 2-part mailing that's just, it's postcard survey, postcard. The reason for that is it significantly reduces costs, and there's less paper and there's less postage. It also reduces the response rate, so it's a trade-off. So, 844 responses, you can feel very confident, extremely confident in your data with that 3% margin of error. And that second survey packet, we do tend to see, in general, about 1/3 of the responses come from that, whether it's they mailed the survey back or they were prompted to take it online. So sort of like the census, they just keep asking you until you finally take it. The more contacts, the higher that response rate gets. So sorry, I don't have the split of online to mail in front of me. But.
That's okay. And I was sort of curious, are you able to see whether older residents typically respond at a greater rate than our younger residents, or?
Yes, universally in every community that we survey in. Hard to reach residents is what we identify. Certain demographics, so younger residents, those that rent versus own their homes, those of lower household income, men are slightly less likely, non-white residents are slightly less, are less likely. So these are all factors at play in terms of who we hear from, and that's why we do that statistical weighting, is to make adjustments so that your data are more representative.
Thank you. Additional questions or interesting presentation? A lot of data points there. Councilor Rowland.
Yeah, I have one more suggestion of just a question, just asking bus riders something to the effect of time. Is it worth their time? Because what I'd like to find out is if their perception is they're not utilizing the buses, then they're putting more strain on the rest of our services as far as the roads. And what can we do to improve ridership? It might be something with the bus, it might be something but the shelter. It might be just something that is totally out of our control, that we have to partner with other neighboring communities of like how can we improve times, and then definitely we want to build density around those areas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Would be interesting to include on the next survey. I can also speak to some of the case studies that we've done with particularly we work with quite a few of our mountain resort communities, and they have typically pretty exceptional ratings in the area of public transportation, bus routes in terms of but all aspects of it really, timeliness, efficiency, et cetera. So just suggesting that is perhaps something to look toward in terms of ways in which to maybe think about improvements. A lot of the mountain communities that have a large degree of ridership and also really high ratings for those services. And it tends to be correlated to how often are they running, how they don't have to wait half an hour for the next one, et cetera. How many stops are there, how widespread is the bus system throughout the community? Can they actually get where they need to go without taking 3 buses to get there? Yeah. With all that said, you're already higher than the national average in that area, so doing something right.
Maybe we just need a big ski hill. Additional questions for Jade? Thank you, Jade. Very nice. Thank you for coming. Great presentation. And so a lot of data to chew through, so
Thank
we
you all.
appreciate it. Thanks so much. Okay. All right, we will go to our second agenda item, and that looks like this is a report back on our hotel licensing ordinance update. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll get Alex getting this set up here. This is a team presentation. There's been a big group of folks working on this, so we're excited to bring this forward this evening. You all set? Ready? Okay. Ready? Okay, so we're here this evening to provide an update on our hotel licensing program. This program has been a major focus for staff over the last 18 months, and it's been good to pull together really this presentation tonight for council in order for us to reflect really on how much work we've done and how far we've come. This is probably really one of the most consequential policy decisions I think the city has made in quite some time. And I think hopefully you'll be pleased with the progress we've been making, but there's still a lot of work ahead of us. So tonight we are going to cover a little bit about the background and the requirements in the current ordinance. Just as a quick reminder, the hotel landscape today over the last 18 months and how it's changed in Wheat Ridge, an update on our licensing portion of the program, public safety updates, statistics, stories and challenges about the long-term residents of the hotels. And then we're going to wrap up with some suggested updates to the code based on some lessons we've learned over the last 18 months. So as I mentioned, this has been a really big team effort. Involves staff from across all departments at the city, including our finance and planning, our housing and homeless navigation, police department, communications, and our city attorney's office. As I Just quickly, too, as I mentioned several weeks ago, the city did receive an award from the Colorado City and County Management Association. It's a Program Excellence Award. So we've been recognized as providing excellent public policy addressing community needs. So next slide, and we'll turn it over to Chris Murtha, Chief Murtha.
Thanks, Patrick. Just as a sort of to go back and refresh our memories, how we ended up starting this ordinance, we looked at our calls for service and the workload that officers were tasked to at our at the time, 9 hotels. It was approximately 10% of all of our calls for service. And really, I think it's 0.05% or 0.05% of all. They account for 0.05% of the businesses. So that was something that really stood out to us. We were spending way too much time at this small number of businesses every day. And really, we weren't making any headway. The same types of calls every day, day in and day out. And we thought we didn't have really good partnerships with our hotels, number one. And we also thought, as we dug into it, that it really wasn't reflective of community values. The more we engaged with some of the owners and some of the occupants there, the more we thought that this probably was not a value, a living accommodation that shared the values of the city that I've come to know. So that being said, we delved into some of the other cities around the nation that have taken this on, and we came up with this with an outline, and you obviously all weighed in on it, and this is where we are. So I'll talk more about where I think we are later in the later slides, but to suggest that this program is a success from the police department's perspective would be an understatement, and I think we'll show you that later on.
Thanks, Chief. Just a reminder, so again, this was, October of 2021. So just as a reminder, let's just chat for a moment about the requirements that you all put in place for hotels. Thanks, Patrick. Those blocks are giant. There we go. So requirements of the hotel license: hotels must achieve and maintain calls for service rate, and Chief can explain a little bit more about what that means. And it was 1.8 that first 12 months, so last year, and this year it's 1.5. So we're monitoring them against that metric. Participate in the city's free, certified, crime-free hotel motel program, comply with landscape inspection program, and of course, building codes, have a security plan that's annually reviewed by the police department, and restrict guest stays to 29 days or less unless the property has obtained an extended stay addendum. I'll add that currently the hotel license fee is $300, and it's renewed annually. I'm gonna just will it. I'm gonna race Patrick. Thanks, Patrick. Great. Patrick, this is a beautiful picture. Patrick added some photos. For the extended stay addendum requirements, this is not Patrick's kitchen. So then you all added extended stay addendum requirements, and I'll just say that because of the likely cost for hotels to renovate to meet these requirements, we don't charge a fee for the extended stay addendum. They have lots of permits and, of course, construction. But those requirements say that the suite must be a minimum of 300 square feet with a separate living room and separate sleeping quarters, cooking facilities, maximum 2 people per dedicated bedroom, adequate storage, housekeeping must be available, 24-hour desk staffing, Wi-Fi available within the room charge, in-room or common area laundry, and then 3 or more of sort of some common area characteristics, including they could choose from business center, fitness center, swimming pool, meeting rooms, restaurant, food on site, etc. And all of these are listed in the ordinance attached in your packet.
Great, thank you, Allie. I'd like to now talk about kind of the current status of our 9 hotels, and a lot of changes over the last 18 months and a lot of positive ones. So when the hotel regulations were developed and adopted, Wheat Ridge had nine hotels. Shortly thereafter, the Howard Johnson Hotel, located on West 44th Avenue in Ward, was sold to Second Chance Homes. It was rezoned to mixed-use commercial zoning on January 10th of 2022. The building permit was issued in October of 2022, and remodeling is currently underway to convert the 108-room hotel and restaurant into approximately 100 units of workforce housing, ranging from 1,100 to 1,500 per month for rent. For studios up to, they'll have a couple two-bedroom units. In January of this year, Terrapin Hospitality, the owner of the Holiday Inn Express in Wheat Ridge, purchased the American Motel. We all know where that is. The site was rezoned to mixed-use commercial interstate on July 11th of last year in anticipation of redevelopment of the site. Trinsic Residential Group is now under contract with Terrapin to purchase the property by January of next year for a scrape and redevelopment project for the construction of a 350 multi-unit residential development. And we are working with Trinsic right now to either provide a small percentage of affordability on site or to contribute cash to the city's housing fund. They'll get the choice. Trinsic is currently working through design and architectural plans. I think we just found out today they were submitted a couple weeks ago to the city. With anticipated submittal, they've already submitted it. So in the meantime, Terrapin is continuing to operate the American Motel as a motel. In May of this year, the Best Interstate Inn at 4735 Kipling Street sold to Villa Property Management. It's a real estate firm out of Salt Lake, Utah. Villa just submitted an application to rezone the property to mixed-use commercial interstate. They intend to renovate the current structures on site to create deeply affordable multi-unit community complete with case management and on-site services. Villa is not currently accepting overnight stays at this location, but they are working with their current residents to assist them in relocating to permanent housing. So big changes, and 3 of our motels are moving on to different uses. The remaining 6 hotels, Apple Inn and Suites was formerly Affordable Inn. Our Holiday Inn Express, Super 8, Motel 6, La Quinta, and Comfort Inn are all still in operation, and they're remaining compliant with hotel and business license requirements. The chief will speak to the improvements they have been making in their calls for service rate. And finally, the Clear Creek Crossing development is going to see up to potentially 3 new motels. The first motel, Hampton Inn, has an approved specific site development plan and is expected to submit a building permit this month. In addition, a second hotel, I think, just had its pre-application with the city, and there's potential for a 3rd hotel also. With that, I'll turn it back to Ally to give a licensing update.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. This is just a quick screenshot of what's on our website. This is, again, truly a team effort to get these hotels licensed every year. It's, the licensing technician, folks in police department, and of course in planning all work together on this. So the 6 hotels that haven't been purchased recently are all properly licensed, and we're currently working with the new owners of the American Motel and Best Interstate to support them in getting licensed while they continue to operate as motels. One hotel, the Apple Inn and Suites, is in the process of applying for the extended stay addendum. So they plan to renovate a portion of their property. I think there's a couple of buildings on that site. Could be wrong. Am I getting Best Interstate? They've just got the one, but they're looking at renovating a portion of the property for extended stay. And actually, when Mr. Klein gets up here and we talk about some recommended code updates, we have something about extended stay that we want to present to you. 2 of the hotels were not eligible to renew their license in January, and I can share that was Motel 6 and Best Interstate, because they did not achieve the 1.8 call for service rate in 2022. So they were given an extension of their existing license. Of course, Best Interstate sold, so that resets. But it looks like the Motel 6 will end up likely complying with this year's CFS rate of 1.5. So this is sort of just a little bit of an illustration of the work and the monitoring and the sort of ongoing conversations. Actually, I think you'll probably speak more to this, that the chief's staff are having with these hotels. And then finally, I just want to share that in December, we actually, if you might recall last year, you authorized or we codified an administrative subpoena process where we could actually go and ask the hotels, we could subpoena the hotels administratively for their guest logs. And we did an initial review of their guest logs, and it was very, very challenging. We got boxes of bits of paper and Post-it notes and all kinds of things submitted to go through and try and organize and get into some, to sort of try and help us paint a little bit of a picture of what is actually happening in the hotels. No one's been penalized. We're trying to sort of educate, partner, really partner with the management folks to say, hey, here's really what we need to see. Here's the intent of the ordinance. And all this to say, it's been a great deal of work, but as Mr. Goff said, probably one of the most impactful policy decisions you all have made, and we're working hard to implement it.
So, as I mentioned earlier, why, from the police department perspective, this is a success. Part one of this ordinance really focused on crime and safety. So what we've seen in and around the hotels is at least a 19% reduction in criminal complaints. To be honest, if we had our crime analyst wasn't off for a couple of weeks, we would probably have an even higher number. Last year, overall, our crime reduction in the city was 26% year over year, and we've seen that in those similar numbers up in and around the hotels, which I think is important because we postulated that the hotels were sort of a nexus for criminal activity, and now we're seeing that in our numbers. We've seen the calls for service go down to just over, I think, 5.2, 5.3% was the number of calls for service. So 10% of all of our calls for service previously had been dedicated to the hotels, and we've almost cut that number in half, which is a tremendous amount of time for officers to go out and be more proactive or engaged in other areas of the city. So we're not just spending our time up at I-70 Kipling and the hotel areas up there. We're seeing a lot more engagement by the hotel management and ownership. We've never had this level of engagement, so as a product of this ordinance, we're able to speak with some authority, whereas before we didn't always get the sort of interaction that we had hoped for from some of our business partners up there. So we continue to see that. We continue to see a reduction in not just that, but accidents in the area. There's less congestion. There's less disorder up in that area. So we see this as an unmitigated success from a crime and safety perspective so far, and we look for continuing that trend. Yep, so up here is just a quick chart to let you kind of see visually where we were with the number of calls for service. 2023 numbers are extrapolated. That would be what, obviously we take a monthly number, so if we looked at it over the course of the year, what we would expect those numbers to be. 2022 was the full year. The numbers highlighted in red are obviously over the 1.8 calls for service in 2022. And as you can see in the right column, everybody is headed towards compliance. The closest to the line is Super 8, but everybody else really has done a lot of work as ownership and as management to bring those numbers down, and we feel that in the police department, so very successful. I'm sorry, calls for service, yeah, I use the acronyms of the police world and we use a lot, so forgive me. Calls for service, the way we calculate that is a call, how many calls per room per year. And a call for service would be, certainly we have looked at the calls for service and we've talked about how we, and we'll, when we talk about updating the ordinance, we'll talk about that. We talk about how we measure that. We don't want to just artificially inflate those numbers. So calls for service are the numbers of calls generated usually by guests or people on the property who are there, and they call us for service, and we calculate that. So we go through each and every hotel. We look at the number of calls that are generated at each one for police services, and then we look to see if it's an actual call, if it's at the right address, if it's the type of call that we would calculate into the numbers. And we've always given the benefit of the doubt to the hotel owners and the hotel properties. Whenever there's a question of whether or not a call for service should be attributed to the hotel, we clear it out. On days where there's severe weather, we clear the whole day out for that hotel that participates. We don't want to penalize them for taking folks in during those days. So we've made those adjustments, and we continue to look at those numbers to make sure that they are the most favorable to the hotel, but certainly holding them accountable. So that's how we get the calls for service numbers.
So some of you may recall, we came to you about this time last year to ask for approval for a partnership with Family Tree, and it was for $500,000 using American Rescue Plan dollars, which was going to specifically be used to support our extended stay hotel guests, and so that would be to provide them with housing navigation services, rent, security deposits, move-in support, as well as case management services. And so to date, we've had 53 households that have enrolled in the Family Tree program, and that includes just under 100 total individuals. What we're finding, and which may not surprise you, is that a lot of people are paying their nightly rates, their weekly rates, and then they're not able to get ahead to save for a deposit, and so they're ultimately paying more money than it would cost for market rate rent, using their weekly, nightly rate. So it's just a really difficult hole to dig yourself out of. So we're extremely thrilled that with our partnership with Family Tree, as of May 31st, we've had 43 individuals that have obtained permanent housing through this program, and 18 of those are officially exited out of the program, which means that they're no longer needing the case management services. They're up and running on their own completely, so which is great. And we actually have a couple members of Family Tree on the call. I'm going to pause the screen sharing for a moment so you can see them. We have Cassie Ratliff, Chief Impact Officer, and Natalie Pacheco, the Connections Program Director, and they are going to share some brief examples of some successes that we're seeing, as well as some of the challenges that we're still seeing as part of this program.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for having us here tonight. We truly appreciate this opportunity, and even more the funding to be able to support the households who have been exiting this program. And like Marianne said, Family Tree's role here has really been to provide those individuals and families who are exiting the motels with supportive services, like whatever folks might need to get their home set up, and that first month's rent and deposit. As you can imagine, a lot of folks who've been living in the motels don't have those household items that many of us have when we move from one place to the next. And so it can be, not only is it costly to come up with the first month's rent and deposit, but also stocking your fridge, learning how to cook again, buying beds and things like that. Those can all be pretty costly. And what we've actually found, where we thought we'd spend a little bit more money on rent, we've actually spent a little bit more on the household side, getting people set up. So that was interesting for us. We have had about 70% of the folks who initially reached out to Family Tree enroll in the program, which I think is actually a pretty high statistic considering some of the challenges that we had up front in the beginning of the program. A lot of the folks were not excited that we were coming in. They had been living in the motels for years. I think we had met someone who had been there for 17, 18 years living there. So they were not really excited when we were showing up saying, hey, we want to help you move on. And we didn't know what we didn't know when we first started. I think as you heard Allie talk about some of the paperwork challenges that the motels had, it was really just unclear who was living there. And we thought there was around 75 folks maybe who had been living in the hotels for a long period of time. But that was really about it. We didn't have much information on demographics, what folks were going through, how much they were paying. It was kind of an opportunity for us to get in and start meeting with folks and learning what their needs were. Engagement was hard. It was really hard with the property managers or hotel managers as well. And it took time, but once we got going and once people really started seeing some of the outcomes that we could have, more and more folks started reaching out to us. And I think we were able to see some really great successes. Often the hotels are a last resort before a person experiences homelessness. People do have opportunities to pay those daily rates. And so they kind of get stuck in this hustle and bustle of coming up with money to pay rent on a daily basis. And again, some of these hotels were not even charging rent on a daily basis. They might let folks slide for a little bit. We had one gentleman who they were letting him stay there until he got his Social Security, and he was just going to pay them back with his back pay. And by the time we started working with him, he had owed almost $5,000. And so one of the biggest barriers we've had to serving folks in the motels has been the fact that a lot of folks have little and oftentimes no income or consistent income. They might be out panhandling or borrowing funds. And so we were a little surprised to see how many folks did not have much income to pay their rent there. All the folks who had really, not all, but the majority of the folks who had consistent income, those are the folks that we're talking about who've been able to obtain housing and even move on from the program already. About 58% of the households that we are working with have a disabling condition, which is a lot higher than a lot of the other housing programs that Family Tree runs. And I would say also the age has been a significant barrier for some of us, or for some of the folks in this program. We've had folks in their 70s, 80s, and early 90s who've been living in the motels for a long period of time, and now they're moving on. And the last time they rented a place was before COVID, and you could go in and fill out an application on a piece of paper and turn it in. We've had a lot of technology challenges. Almost everything is online now, and a lot of folks just don't have that experience. To date, I think we have spent about almost 40% of the funds in the program. Of the folks that we have left, I think they are the folks that are going to be the hardest for us to house. They are the folks with little income. We are working closely with Foothills Regional Housing Authority to identify more affordable options for folks, subsidized complexes or subsidized units or vouchers. We have had some pretty cool successes though. One of the first clients that we worked with is 88 years old, and she was actually staying at at the La Quinta, and they enacted the 29-day ordinance pretty early on, and she had been living at a different hotel, a different La Quinta that had some problems, and they transferred her over here. And when her 29 days was up, they just kicked her out of the room, and she was sitting in the lobby, didn't know what to do, didn't have any of our contact information yet. Finally, someone at the motel gave her a flyer, and we were able to get in touch with her. She did not have any transportation. We ended up having to go to, and this was, I think, in November, so it was pretty cold out and snowing. Eventually, the hotel asked her to leave the lobby, and she had to go sit outside. We were able to get transportation for her. We were able to get her into a different room at a different motel. And then we were able to partner with Foothills in order to get her a voucher, so she has permanent affordable housing. That was probably one of our more stressful moments. We just weren't sure what we were going to do, and if I'm being honest, a lot of us were just feeling for her. She reminded us of family members or grandparents, and really wanted to make sure that we were able to keep her safe. We worked with another resident as well who he did have some criminal background, and it made housing really hard for him. And I think one of the things that stands out the most for this gentleman was his comments to us that we didn't give up on him. He was denied several units because of this background, and that's why he was staying on staying in the motels. He didn't have many other places to go. And then Natalie Pacheco is here, and I know she would actually like to share another success story with you. Natalie, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you again for the funding. It has been really helpful to serve the clients that we've been working with. And so I wanted to share also another success that there was. So with the case management, we've been able to provide a lot of services to multiple clients, get them connected and alleviate some of that pressure and that stress. That goes with the house searching, the apartment searching, and just, navigating the moves, getting items for the household and things like that. But there was one client in particular too that they had stated that because of some medical issues, they were unable to continue their employment where they were at, and they fell behind. They started staying in the hotels, and then they just settled there because they weren't able to pay their rent, their deposit, or any move-in fees and things like that. So after they got connected to us, they were a little resistant because they didn't want to accept the funding because they had never asked for any assistance or any funding from anyone. And so to them, it just seemed like they were begging someone for help. After we talked to this client and we, built some report and started the case management, the client was very happy, very thankful. They were able to move into their place, and now they call it a home. And they have just been so thankful of the whole, program. And at first they saw the ordinance as something that was putting them out in the street. After this, it changed, and they said that if it would have not been for this, they probably would have continued living at a motel and probably would have died there. And now they're able to go to a home and call that a place where they live at. And so if something does happen there, they said that they are okay where they're at now. So I just wanted to share that because that was very impactful to me.
Yeah, it's been, this was a hard program to start up, probably one of the hardest I've ever done. It was based off of and modeled off a similar program that Family Tree had about 10 years ago. And that program, it was working with folks in motels. The difference, what we realized afterwards, was those were folks who were coming to us wanting to move out, ready to be on their own. And this was us having to go out and engage with folks. And so it was definitely hard to set up and get moving. However, here at the end, I think we're at the place where we are really starting to see the successes and feel that from the folks that we're serving. So thank you again for having us here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cassie. And now we'll turn it over. It's our last slide, I believe. Nick Klein. As I mentioned, we do have a couple recommendations for some changes to the ordinance, and Mr. Klein has been helping us with that. So, Nick.
Over the past 18 months, the team has evaluated how the program has gone, and especially over the last couple of months, I think it's fair to say, we as a team have thought about possible code amendments to better implement the program. And the first amendment would be allowing an extended stay without an extended stay license addendum a violation of the program. At the moment, for whatever reason, maybe an oversight in implementing the program, there is no penalty against the hotel license itself for permitting an extended stay. Staff could go and bring an enforcement action against the general business license, but that wouldn't really make sense given the hotel licensing scheme as it exists now. So staff is recommending a code amendment to make it explicitly unlawful under the ordinance to permit extended stays without the extended stay addendum, and thus allowing us to bring an enforcement action if someone were to be permitting extended stays. Following up on the extended stay idea, there's no clear definition of what constitutes an extended stay. Yes, anything over 29 days would be, but could a person moving from room to room, or if one person signs up and the other person whose name doesn't appear on the registry lives in that room, would that still be an extended stay violation? Which is why we suggest a stronger definition of the 29-length stay to clearly state that a guest cannot stay anywhere on the property and that that guest must return after the passage of a certain period of time. This period of time we would appreciate feedback on. Perhaps that's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. That's something we would leave up to council to decide. As Chief mentioned earlier, we would like to further define how the CFS rate is calculated. There's 3 bullet points in here that we wanted to highlight, providing in clearer detail the events which factor into a CFS calculation. The codification that severe weather days, as declared by the Severe Weather Shelter Network, are not considered for CFS purposes. The PD at the moment has not been including these severe weather days for CFS purposes, and we would just like to see that on the books. And further defining the types of calls the PD will and will not use in calculating hotels' CFS rate. And then finally, it's been staff's practice to permit someone to offer extended stays without the extended stay license addendum if that person is actively working towards meeting the qualifications for the extended stay addendum that were identified in the slide with the picture of Patrick's kitchen. And our suggested approach is amending Section 26-114 to shorten the term of an SUP that's issued to a hotel business. Currently, all SUPs are valid for 12 months, meaning they must become operational within that 12 months of approval. And a building application permit is valid for 6 months, and the issued building permit is valid for 12 months. This can create a 24-month rolling grace period. We suggest changing the SUP validity timeline to 6 months to match what the city currently does for retail and medical marijuana businesses. So there is a bit of a precedent there to have a shorter and lifespan SUP. And those 4 suggested amendments together are what we think as staff would help in implementing the program further.
Great. Thanks, Nick. That's our presentation this evening, our update. We're here for any questions you may have.
Okay.
And then looking for some potential consensus on bringing forward an ordinance on these amendments.
Terrific. Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask for consensus to go forward with the 4 suggested amendments and add a 1-month time gap for the requested time difference between when they can be in the hotel.
Call for consensus on it. Okay, you want to? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. So with the 1-month period, I'm just sort of thinking about sort of how that measures against like people bumping around, and if what we're trying to do, if we're trying to encourage people to be staying in places that are appropriate for long stays, I think a little bit more time in between resetting will help encourage either hotels to move towards complying with the extended stay addendum, and not just have people bouncing around from place to place. And with the strength of the services that we're providing and support that we're providing, I guess I'd like to propose a 3-month, actually 2-month on that.
Then the consensus comes back instead of 1 month, 2 month, otherwise remains the same with what Councilwoman Hoppe. Well, we seem to have consensus on that.
Okay. 2 month?
2 months, and then okay on everything else.
Okay. And we'll bring back more research on the
Yeah.
1 month, 2 month, and just so you
Okay.
have more background on that. But That's it, really, for tonight, unless you have any
Okay,
questions for us.
does that answer all your questions? Counselor Hulteen?
Not a question, just a quick comment. I just want to just acknowledge our staff's just humane approach to this
Yeah.
with zeroing out severe weather and just recognizing we are still dealing with humans who have human needs. And I just really appreciate the flexibility and just the human-centered approach to that. So just I want to recognize staff for that approach.
Okay, does that get all the questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great report by staff and Chief. We appreciate your work out there and your team's work. I think it's really encouraging that we've seen a significant drop in crime, particularly in the hotel corridor up at I-70. So thank you all. And let's see, that sort of concludes the things that we had on the agenda for our study session. Do we have any other reports from staff or elected officials before we conclude our operations tonight? Doesn't look like any. We will not be here next week, so have a great Juneteenth and a little break off, and we'll be back on the following week. So drive safely throughout our city. Thank you very much.